So they departed at Cove. It was called Queenstown at that time, but that's the port city of Cork. When you go in the museum at Cove, such a staggering experience. Not only are they talking about the Irish problem, but they also talk about the Titanic, which sank right off the coast of Ireland. So the imagery you get is just stunning. The ship did regular trips back and forth. It would leave Liverpool with some passengers, and if they didn't have the boat full, they would stop out in the harbor of Cove, and the old wharf that's decaying, where our people would have stepped onto a boat to be taken out to the Onward, that wharf is still there today. They stopped in Cove, picked up people, and then came on to New Orleans. The price of passage back then was £7. It's kind of hard to know, using today's figures, what that would be, but I imagine it, on the one hand, it was not that expensive, but at the same time, it would have been a huge amount of money for a family that had been starving for several years to come up with the money for passage. Did they have a landlord who wanted to ship them off? Was there a brother sending back money from the U.S.? We'll probably never know. There's another one of the really chilling statistics, and that is that of those several million who did dare to try to relocate across the ocean, the death rate on the famine ships was said to be as high as 30%, which is just stunning to be spending 6 weeks, 2 months with this group of people and having people die. I would think every day it would just be like a daily occurrence, and people being thrown overboard just like little Peter II. Many of the passengers on these ships were already in poor health from malnutrition and illness. The crowded lodging arrangements in Cove and Liverpool, where immigrants were forced to stay before embarking, became one of the main sources of shipboard illnesses. Doctors rejected almost no one for embarkation for health reasons. Many Irish had been lured to the ports by their landlords with false promises of money, food, and clothing as a way of getting rid of them, or actually cutting their tax bill from London. Many travelers fell prey to runners or local confidence men and lost money or belongings in the port cities. They were crammed into these ships, probably twice the number of people that were actually legal by English laws. When I got to the port records of New Orleans and actually counted how many people were listed as having come over on the boat, and it was a total of 359 people, which when you look at the picture of the ship, it's just hard to fathom how that many people were crowded on a relatively small ship. They must have been stuffed everywhere, down in the bowels of the ship and on the deck and everywhere. And this doesn't count the ship's crew. But the captains of these ships were making money, and they didn't have a lot of supervision over them. I imagine it was pretty much what they could get away with, and they did get away with a lot. Just try to imagine how bad it was down in the hold of the ship with poor ventilation, and you're crowded one on top of the other. The food is pathetic. The water is very suspect by this point. Medical supplies virtually non-existent. Overcrowded bunks with tables down the center, down in steerage where the people were crammed. Just had to create the perfect breeding ground for disease, The diseases, cholera, typhus, dysentery, and food poisoning were common. But the odds of surviving that ship voyage were not good. As we know in our family, Peter II died, but there were whole families, whole ships that were lost. These were ships that had a few decades before been used to transport slaves from Africa and the Caribbean. But then they were retrofitted to become the means of trying to move these people out of Ireland. Actually, the English were even promoting it because the English were getting taxed according to the number of serfs or peasants or whatever you want to call the Irish people who were living on their land. So it said that in some cases the English even helped pay the passage for the families to make the trip across the Atlantic. The whole of the ship where these people were crowded in, just as slaves had been, they had long tables, they were feeding people there, and this close proximity had to have caused a great increase in the mortality rate. It's not like being on a cruise ship today, having your own private room. These people were herded in much as you would herd cattle, just being treated in the most inhumane way. It's just amazing that these people were so tough that they survived that 6 weeks at sea. Again, a very emotional thing to recreate in your own mind what our folks went through. So they were really just transporting the human cargo as a sideline, a way of making money off the trip over. What they were really intent on doing was bringing the cotton from New Orleans back to Liverpool. They arrived in New Orleans, which was an incredibly bustling place. It may have been the largest port in the United States at that time. If not, it would certainly be the second largest. It was just an incredible wave of immigrants coming in, a large part of them being folks from Ireland. But the drawing I have from the riverfront at that time shows that there were so many ships anchored there that they just came in head on rather than parking the boat sideways. It was just so much activity here in the port. The family arrived here and found a quite different situation than what they'd known in Ireland, even in Queenstown. New Orleans, as it almost always has been, is big and loud and gaudy, and I'm sure our family was pretty well freaked out when they got on shore here. There is mention made that they were taken aback by seeing the first African Americans, there being none in Ireland, of course. Well, I'd say our people were rather smart, according to the versions that I have read, that they got almost immediately on a train and headed up into Mississippi. I realize this varies with some of the family folklore, but this was the version written by the priest who did the very first genealogy of the family. And as he was doing it very close to the time, like late 19th century, I tend to put a lot of stock in his belief that they did come straight north, and some even say that they rode until they ran out of money. Others say that they rode until they got to the Sulphur Springs area, where there was this Irish colony that had begun about 5 years earlier. It had only been there since the mid-1840s. Number of families that interconnect with the family, primarily the Lucketts and the Whalens, had moved as a group from Georgia. In the early 1850s, our people arrived. Folklore in the family has it that the brother or uncle of Peter had come over first, and that he sent the money back to Ireland to pay for Peter and Ann's family to come over. And I would imagine they must have had some funds to have been able to pay to get on a train and head north. We don't know who this first man over here was. They stayed for a while with the Hammonds family that had just come in from the Carolinas. We don't know how long they stayed there, but a priest's account of that period says that Peter and Ann soon moved on from Madison County over into Leake County for land along the Yakanukani River. And one of the biggest surprises, come to find out, Eliza's sister has a large wooden box, like a trunk, that Peter and Ann used to bring their belongings over from Ireland. And that box has been used for quilts or various uses and has passed down through the family. So it is the original piece of memorabilia of the family's history that we have today. The actual purchase of the land was in 1860, so we really don't know how long they'd been there. Perhaps they'd been on the land working for someone, getting together the money that they needed for the purchase. Some of the younger ones, Thomas and Mary, would have still been children, but Patrick and Michael, they were on up like into their late teen, early 20s, so that they could have been a big help in getting the family going. You know, Peter Whalen is one of the Whalens were also in that first wave that came to Sulphur Springs. And we know of Peter Whalen as the one who donated the land for the church. But it turns out that he is the nephew of the priest back in Locust Grove, Georgia, who was Father Peter Whalen. There was an order of nuns even earlier, St. Joseph nuns from Carondelet, Missouri, who had come down to Sulphur Springs and had a convent and a fairly large school going. But then the Civil War came along and their Mother Superior called them back to Missouri. So it was the materials from that convent and that school that were actually used to build the first St. Anne's Church. Some of the men of the community got together. Evidently it was fine with the priest at Sulphur Springs. He wanted to see a church built over at St. Anne's. So they tore down the convent and school the St. Joseph nuns had. Got off the boat here in New Orleans and kept moving. And ultimately started the community of St. Anne's. Conditions for the Irish were difficult in many ways, economic, religious, and political. They were a subjugated people under British rule, without property rights, religiously oppressed by Anglican England, and without political representation of any sort. Small wonder that the Harkins family and the St. Anne's community, who now had property rights, religious freedom, and political representation, became the first box to report in every Mississippi election for many years. It was just hard-headed determination, I think, that got these people from Ireland over here. Some characteristics we have been known to see show up in the family here and there.